You watch her pull away and you cannot understand why. Everything seemed fine last week, last month, maybe even last year. You provided stability. You showed up consistently in the ways you knew how. You built a life together that from the outside looks perfectly functional. But something shifted, and now she is talking about needing space, about feeling lonely in the relationship, about how she cannot do this anymore. You are the same person you have always been. You have not changed. So what happened? Here is what nobody tells you about why women over 40 leave stable relationships with neurodivergent men, and it has almost nothing to do with what you think. The woman in her early 40s who walks away from a decade-long relationship is not leaving because of a single catastrophic event. She is leaving because of 10,000 small moments where she felt invisible. She stayed through her 30s because she believed love meant patience, because she thought if she just explained her needs more clearly or found the right approach, things would click into place. But 40 hits different. Something happens in a woman's brain around this age where the tolerance for emotional labor without reciprocity drops to nearly zero. The same behaviors she rationalized at 32 become intolerable at 43. It is not that she loves you less. It is that she finally loves herself more than she loves the project of trying to be understood. Think about what this looks like in real time. She comes home from work and starts telling you about a conflict with her boss. You are listening, technically. Your ears are receiving the words. But she can see your eyes glazing over after about 90 seconds, and she watches you glance at your phone, or she notices the exact moment your attention shifts to something else in the room. She stops talking mid-sentence and you do not even notice she stopped. This happens 3 times a week for 8 years. That is over 1,000 moments where her lived experience bounced off you like you were made of glass. Now multiply that across every type of interaction. The conversations about her feelings that you process like troubleshooting sessions. The times she needed comfort, but you offered solutions. The moments she wanted you to notice something without her having to explicitly request your attention. Each one alone is survivable. All of them together over years become the architecture of her loneliness. Women over 40 are exiting what psychologists call the accommodation phase. This is the period where they shape themselves around your neurological needs, where they learn to communicate in bullet points, where they scheduled intimacy and calendared connection because spontaneity did not work with your brain. They became project managers of the relationship's emotional infrastructure. And here is the part that makes this so painful for both of you. You probably had no idea this was happening. From your perspective, she was just being organized or direct. You thought this was her natural communication style. You did not realize she spent 15 years translating herself into a language your brain could process, while slowly losing fluency in her own emotional dialect. The ADHD man in his mid-40s often has no framework for understanding why the stability he provides is not enough. You pay the bills. You show up for family obligations. You have never cheated or lied or done any of the dramatic relationship-destroying behaviors that justify leaving. You have been loyal and consistent in your way. But she is not leaving because you failed at the big obvious things. She is leaving because the constant low-grade emotional neglect has calcified into something she can no longer carry. You forget the small things she mentioned mattering to her. You interrupt her stories to redirect to topics that interest you more. You agree to plans and then seem genuinely confused when she expects you to remember them without 17 reminders. She watches you hyper-focus for 6 hours on reorganizing your tool collection, but you cannot maintain attention through a 20-minute conversation about her mother's health crisis. The math stops mathing for her. What makes this especially confusing for neurodivergent men is that the relationship probably got better in some ways over the years. You learned some of her patterns. You developed systems that worked. You had fewer explosive conflicts than you did early on. From your perspective, you evolved together and found a rhythm. You're right about that. But what you are missing is that the rhythm required her to shrink. She became smaller and quieter and needed less. She stopped asking you to do things you found difficult. She stopped expecting certain types of emotional presence. She built a life around your limitations while her own needs went into hibernation. At 35, she told herself this was maturity and compromise. At 42, she realizes it was self-abandonment. The autistic man often experiences this as a sudden betrayal. She seemed fine until she was not. There were no clear warnings, no systematic progression of complaints that you could track and address. But here is what was actually happening. She was giving you warnings in her language and you were not fluent enough to hear them. When she said, "I feel like we are roommates," you heard a factual observation about spending less time together and maybe suggested scheduling date night. You did not hear, "I am dying of emotional starvation in this relationship, and I need you to be present with me in a way you have never figured out how to be." When she said, "I need more from you," you asked what specifically she meant because you genuinely wanted to understand the requirements. But she needed you to want to figure out what more meant without it being assigned like a task. She needed you to be curious about her inner world without a prompt. The linguistic gap between what she said and what she meant became the canyon your relationship disappeared into. If this is hitting close to home, hit that like button, because this gets deeper and you need to understand the full picture of what is happening here. Subscribe if you want the truth about relationships that most people are too uncomfortable to discuss openly. This is not about blaming anyone. This is about understanding a pattern that destroys thousands of relationships every year, while both people involved feel confused and hurt. The woman over 40 who leaves is often dealing with perimenopause or early menopause, and this is not irrelevant to the story. Hormonal shifts change how much bandwidth she has for managing other people's emotional regulation. For years, she might have been the calm one who could absorb your meltdowns over routine changes or unexpected plans. She could be the steady presence who talked you down from rejection-sensitive spirals. But now, her own neurochemistry is in chaos, and she does not have the reserves to be your emotional shock absorber anymore. She needs support too. And when she reaches for you, she finds that you are excellent in a crisis with clear parameters, but lost when her distress is hormonal and nameless. You want to fix it, and there is nothing to fix. You want her to tell you exactly what she needs, and what she needs is for you to sit in the discomfort with her without trying to solve your way out of it. This skill does not come naturally to the neurodivergent brain, and the gap between what she needs and what you can provide becomes unbridgeable. Here is another layer that nobody talks about. Women over 40 start doing the math on their remaining years. If she is 43 and you are 45, she is looking at potentially 40 more years. 40 years of being the relationship's executive function. 40 years of reminding and managing and translating. 40 years of feeling fundamentally alone while technically partnered. She looks at her friends who are married to neurotypical men, and she sees a kind of ease in their relationships that she has never experienced. She sees couples who can have meandering conversations that go nowhere in particular. She sees men who notice when their wives get new haircuts without being told. She sees partnerships where both people seem to naturally attune to each other's emotional states. She knows those relationships have their own problems, but they do not have this specific problem, and she is tired of pretending that does not matter. The stability you provided was real and valuable, but here is what you need to understand. Stability is table stakes. It is the minimum, not the maximum. She stayed for the stability through her 30s when she was building a career and maybe raising kids and managing a household. The stability was essential during that season. But now the kids are older or gone, the career's established, the house is managed, and she is looking around asking what this relationship gives her beyond the infrastructure. Who is she when she is not performing the role of the capable partner who holds everything together? When she asks herself that question, she realizes she has no idea because she has been so busy compensating for your executive function deficits that she lost track of herself. The neurodivergent man often experiences object permanence issues with emotional connection. Out of sight, out of mind is not just about physical objects for you. It extends to people and relationships. When she is not directly in front of you expressing a need, it genuinely does not occur to you to check in or reach out or maintain the connection. You can go days without meaningful interaction, and not feel the absence because your brain does not send you signals that something is missing. But her brain works differently. She feels the absence acutely. Every day you do not ask about her with genuine curiosity is a day she feels forgotten. You think everything is fine because there is no active conflict. She experiences your contentment with the status quo as evidence that you do not need her in any deep way, that she is functionally interchangeable with anyone else who could manage the household systems. Here is where it gets really painful. She probably still loves you. She might even tell you that as she is leaving. This makes no sense to your logical brain. If she loves you and you love her and neither of you did anything dramatically wrong, why is the relationship ending? Because love without attunement is not enough. Love without feeling known is not enough. Love without emotional presence is not enough. She needs to be seen and understood and remembered without having to constantly remind you that she exists as a person with an inner life. Your brain is not wired to do this automatically, and she is done being the one who bridges that gap every single day. The brutal truth is that many neurodivergent men do not realize what they had until it is gone. You spend the first 6 months after she leaves thinking she will come back once she realizes the grass is not greener. You expect her to return when she sees that dating in her 40s is hard, that other men have their own issues, that what you built together was valuable. But she does not come back, and slowly you start to understand that she is lighter without you. Her friends comment that they have not seen her this vibrant in years. She starts doing things she stopped doing at some point during your relationship, things you did not even realize she had given up. She travels spontaneously. She takes classes in random subjects. She has long, rambling phone calls with friends where nobody is tracking the conversational efficiency. She discovers she actually likes her own company when she is not constantly aware of being misunderstood. Drop a comment if you have lived through any version of this, because understanding what happened is the first step to not repeating the pattern. This is not just about one relationship. This is about a fundamental incompatibility between how neurodivergent and neurotypical brains process intimacy and connection. And unless you understand the mechanism, you will watch this pattern repeat with the next partner and the one after that. The working memory issues that come with ADHD mean you are not building a continuous narrative of the relationship in your mind. You remember the peaks and valleys, the intense moments, the big events. But the daily texture of connection does not get encoded the same way. She remembers the Tuesday in October when you walked right past her crying in the kitchen because you were focused on getting to your computer. She remembers the anniversary you forgot even though she mentioned it 3 times in the preceding week. She remembers the family gathering where you spent 2 hours talking about your special interest while her relative's eyes glazed over, and you did not notice her trying to redirect the conversation. You genuinely do not remember these moments because they did not register as significant in your memory system. To you, they are blips. To her, they are the evidence that accumulated into her understanding of how little space she occupies in your mind when she is not actively demanding your attention. Women over 40 also become less willing to perform emotional labor that goes unrecognized. In her 30s, she might have taken pride in being understanding, in being the partner who got you when others did not, in being patient with your neurological differences. This felt like love. But at some point, it started feeling like sacrifice without reciprocity. She is not getting recognition for the constant adaptation she does because you mostly do not realize she is doing it. From your perspective, communication just happens. From her perspective, communication is a thing she engineers every single day by translating her organic emotional expressions into formats your brain can process. She is tired of being a translator in her own relationship. The sensory processing differences create another layer of disconnection. You need your environment controlled in specific ways. Certain sounds, textures, lights, or levels of stimulation overwhelm your system, and you shut down or become irritable. She learned early on to manage the environment for you. She keeps the house at the temperature you need. She warns people not to surprise you. She runs interference with social obligations that would overload you. She has become so skilled at this that you do not even notice it happening. But here is what that means for her. She is constantly monitoring and adjusting to keep you regulated, while nobody is tracking what environment she needs to thrive. Her sensory needs became invisible because someone had to be the flexible one, and your nervous system does not do flexible well. After 20 years of this, she realizes she cannot remember the last time she got to choose the restaurant based on what she wanted instead of what would not overwhelm you. The social communication differences show up most painfully in how you interact with her friends and family. You are either too honest in ways that offend people, or you are obviously masking and everyone can feel the performance, or you withdraw entirely and she has to explain your absence over and over. Her social world starts shrinking because maintaining friendships requires a level of emotional reciprocity and small talk that exhausts you. She stops inviting people over because managing your comfort level and their expectations is too much work. She starts seeing friends alone, and slowly you become parallel people who share a living space but not a life. She looks around one day and realizes all the compromises she made to accommodate your social needs have left her isolated in ways she never intended. The thing about autistic and ADHD men is that you are often most attentive and engaged during the hyperfocus phase of new relationships. You can sustain that intensity for months or even a couple of years. She fell in love with that version of you, the one who asked endless questions about her life, who remembered tiny details she mentioned, who seemed fascinated by her inner world. But hyperfocus is not sustainable. It is a neurological state, not a personality trait. Eventually, your brain moves on to other focuses, and your attention on her decreases to whatever your baseline is. She experiences this as you losing interest, as the relationship becoming routine and boring for you. You experience it as things settling into a comfortable normal. She is waiting for you to return to the connection you had early on. You have no idea she is waiting because from your perspective, nothing changed. You are still here, still committed, still in the relationship. You do not understand that presence without attention is not the same as connection. Here is what makes this so hard. You probably did everything you knew how to do. You went to therapy, maybe. You read books about relationships. You tried to implement systems to remember important dates. You set phone reminders to check in with her. You made genuine efforts to be a better partner. But all of that was still you managing tasks, and what she needed was not task completion. She needed you to want to understand her emotional reality without it being an assignment. She needed your curiosity about her to be intrinsic, not prompted by calendar notifications. The gap between executed tasks and genuine emotional presence is something neurotypical people feel acutely, and neurodivergent people often cannot perceive at all. The rejection sensitivity that comes with ADHD makes this whole dynamic worse. When she tries to tell you she is unhappy or needs something different, you hear it as criticism, and your nervous system floods with shame. You either shut down completely or become defensive. She learns that trying to address problems causes you so much distress that it is easier to just not bring things up. So she stops telling you what is wrong. She manages her unhappiness privately. You think everything is fine because there is no conflict. She is drowning quietly right next to you. By the time she tells you she is leaving, she has already done months or years of internal processing and grieving. You are just finding out there is a problem at the exact moment she has already decided it is unsolvable. This feels incredibly unfair to you, and from your perspective it is. But from her perspective, she tried to tell you in hundreds of small ways that you could not hear. The executive function challenges that make it hard for you to initiate tasks also make it hard for you to initiate intimacy or connection. She is always the one who suggests date nights, who brings up important conversations, who reaches for you physically. You are responsive when she initiates, but you do not think to seek her out. Your brain does not generate the impulse to connect without external prompting. She starts to feel like she is chasing you for scraps of attention. She wonders what it would be like to be wanted in an active way, to be pursued, to have someone think about her and reach for her without her having to ask first. After years of being the initiator in every aspect of intimacy, she is exhausted. She wants to be chosen, not just accepted. Women over 40 often have their own health issues emerging, and this is when they really need a partner who can show up with emotional intelligence. She gets a scary diagnosis and needs someone to process the fear with her. She needs you to ask questions, to remember what the doctor said, to be present in the uncertainty. But you do not know how to hold space for ambiguous emotional experiences. You either minimize the concern because you are trying to make her feel better, or you spiral into your own anxiety about worst-case scenarios, and she ends up comforting you. Either way, she is alone with her fear. This happens once, twice, 3 times, and she realizes that in the moments when she most needs emotional partnership, you cannot be that for her. Not because you do not care, but because your neurology does not equip you with the tools to provide what she needs. The pattern recognition abilities that come with autism mean you are probably excellent at certain types of problem solving. You can see systems and structures that other people miss. You can hyper-focus on complex projects and produce brilliant work. You have gifts that are real and valuable, but pattern recognition in mechanical or intellectual domains does not translate to pattern recognition in emotional dynamics. You do not see the pattern of her slowly diminishing over the years. You do not notice the progression from vibrant to depleted. You miss the trajectory of disconnection because emotional patterns do not register in your consciousness the same way logical patterns do. By the time the pattern is obvious enough for you to see, the relationship is already over. Here is the thing about stability. It can become a trap. The life you built together is comfortable in a material sense. The mortgage is manageable. The routines are established. The lifestyle is predictable. For your brain, this stability is regulating. It allows you to function without constant overwhelm. But for her, the stability started feeling like stagnation. She looks at the next 20 years and sees the same patterns repeating infinitely. The same conversations going nowhere, the same loneliness dressed up as partnership, the same feeling of being fundamentally unknown by the person who knows her longest. The security you provided becomes the cage she needs to escape. The truth that nobody wants to say out loud is that some neurological differences are incompatible with certain types of intimacy. It is not about anyone being broken or wrong. It is about 2 operating systems trying to run the same program and discovering that the code is not compatible. She needs spontaneous emotional attunement. Your brain does not generate that spontaneously. She needs to be remembered and thought about when she is not present. Your brain has object permanence issues with emotional connections. She needs conversations that meander and explore without predetermined outcomes. Your brain finds those conversations exhausting and purposeless. She needs you to notice her subtle emotional states without her naming them. Your brain does not read subtle emotional cues reliably. These are not things you can fix with enough effort or the right system. These are fundamental differences in how your brains process intimacy. The women who leave are not looking for perfect partners. They are looking for relationships where they do not have to be the sole architect of connection. They want partnerships where emotional labor is shared, where they feel met halfway, where they can occasionally fall apart without having to manage their partner's response to their falling apart. They want to be known in the way that requires ongoing curiosity and attention. They want to matter in the daily mundane moments, not just during scheduled quality time. These are not unreasonable needs. But they are needs that require neurological capacities you do not naturally have. What makes this devastating for both people is that there is often tremendous love present even as the relationship ends. She sees your goodness and your struggles. She knows you have been trying in your way. She does not think you are a bad person or a failed partner. But she also knows she cannot keep translating herself into a language that your brain can understand while losing her own fluency. She cannot keep being small enough to fit into the space your neurology can accommodate. She cannot keep performing the role of the infinitely patient partner who never needs more than you can give. Something has to give, and what gives is the relationship. The reason this happens more after 40 is that women at that age have less to lose by leaving. The kids are older. The career is established. The social judgment feels less important. The fear of being alone shifts from something terrifying to something that might actually be peaceful. She has watched enough friends die or get divorced or survive cancer to know that life is short, and she does not want to spend her remaining years feeling invisible in her own relationship. She would rather be actually alone than lonely while partnered. This is not impulsive. This is the result of years of calculation, where she kept hoping things would change enough to make staying sustainable, and finally accepting that they will not. For the neurodivergent man left behind, this often becomes a moment of devastating clarity. You finally see what you could not see while she was there. You understand the 1,000 small moments that added up to her leaving. You recognize patterns you were blind to during the relationship. You want to go back and do it differently, but she is done. She doesn't want to teach you how to see her anymore. She doesn't want to be the test case for your growth. She needs you to let her go, so she can find out who she is when she is not constantly accommodating someone else's neurological needs. This is not about punishment or revenge. This is about survival. The hard truth is that many of these relationships were doomed from the start, not because anyone failed, but because the foundation was built on her adaptability rather than genuine compatibility. She convinced herself that love plus effort could bridge any gap. You convinced yourself that her acceptance of your limitations meant those limitations did not matter. Both of you were wrong. Some gaps are too wide to bridge, no matter how much both people want the relationship to work. This is nobody's fault and everyone's tragedy. Understanding why women over 40 leave stable relationships with neurodivergent men is not about assigning blame. It is about recognizing that emotional neglect does not require intention. It is about accepting that your neurological differences create gaps in intimacy that you cannot always compensate for. It is about acknowledging that stability without emotional presence is not enough for most people long term. It is about seeing that the accommodations she made to be with you had costs that accumulated over decades until the price became too high. This is the truth. It is uncomfortable and painful, and it applies to more relationships than anyone wants to admit. But understanding it is the only path to doing things differently next time, or accepting that some types of relationships might not be sustainable for you, regardless of how much you want them to be.